So we're calling the budget committee meeting of February 22nd to order. It's now 6 p.m. Noting all board members are present. Need to approve the agenda, please.
So approved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we'll go forward with the agenda. There's no public comments that anybody has received, so I don't see any audience, so we'll move forward. So budget update, Steve, take it away.
So this agenda item relates to the current fiscal year, so 21-22. I just have a note that says, as of the end of January, no expenditures have come from the contingency fund and no other significant changes to the budget have taken place. Things are in really good shape for this year. I mean, we really have not had any surprises or anything come up, and we're actually in really good, really good fiscal position for this current year. And then we'll start diving a little bit deeper into what we think might be remaining at the end of the year as we get a little bit closer. But as of right now, we are in a really strong position with this year's budget. Does anybody have any questions or anything you wanted to share?
Hearing none, let's move on to budget planning process.
So the first agenda item is the timeline. You don't have to bring this up, Rebecca. So I did attach the timeline just as a reminder about where we are in the process. In February, we just had another look at the budget planning process, which we'll do in just a moment. And then we also had on the timeline the 3-year staffing requests that were due from the members of the administrative team during the month of January, which we also have on the agenda tonight. So those were the 2 items related to the timeline that are on the agenda tonight.
Steve, I have a question regarding staff input with supervisors and building principals. I didn't see it in the timeline. Saw that in January, the principals had to have some of their requests and staff requests, but I didn't see where that happens. Is that happening within the buildings and with the non-teaching staff, or?
Yeah, so Rebecca, would you mind pulling up the timeline for just a moment?
Unless I missed it.
No, that's fine. So if you can see the April 14th date highlighted there, each of the building principals have been asked to work with their teacher leaders to work on making sure that all of the needs for each of the curricular areas are being identified. The example that we've given to members of the administrative team is how the music teachers put together a plan for music instruments, shared it with the board, and was able to advocate for the needs of the music department. We've given that as an example about how we've asked the members of the administrative team to engage with, as an example, their tech ed teachers, engage with family and consumer ed teachers. So we've asked for that part to take place as well, which is the part that is due by April 14th, which will then allow us to have a complete picture for the first draft of the budget in May. So I think that's the part you're referring to, but if that's not, feel free to.
That is, and so that's not limited to those that you mentioned with like at the elementary level. They
Yes,
have input at some point.
absolutely. Yep.
But
I would almost submit that each one of you, like the math department, should put together their 3-year plan. The music department did put together their 3-year plan. The English, each one of those, curricular groups should be looking at this, and all of that is driving up into, the the overall plan to say, hey, can we afford this or not?
And Ally has already prepared the document and has shared it with members of the administrative team for them to be able to use. So the framework has been set up to allow that.
Perfect.
Again, this is new, so,
Yep.
results may vary, but we have it set up so that, we can, bring that information to you and get that feedback from, each of the curriculum areas and each of the schools.
Steve, I guess the question I've got, and again, this is new and, I appreciate us doing it, because I think it's going to create a lot of visibility on what's out there. But should we be starting this earlier? Because I think this year we started in the December timeframe for the staffing.
Yep.
Should we be starting this in October? Where we start looking at, because the budget is done. There's not a lot of stuff that's being done from other than the board approving anything. Does that make sense, or do you see this process working better?
No, I think that does make sense, Jack. And one of the things that is going to be a good discussion for the board members to have is how do we feed in other board committee work into a timeline that ends up making sense? Randy gave me some policies that are out there that he suggested we weave into exactly what you're saying, Jack, into a process that starts earlier. So as an example, you saw high school course curriculum requests that were put on hold while co-curricular activities were approved, right? Each on separate paths without being actually driven into a process where we would look at everything together. So we do think that makes sense, Jack, to move everything back, to line up all of the committee work into a process that makes sense, so that as board members, you can see more of a complete picture. Because I think it probably in the end didn't make sense to hold on high school courses while approving co-curricular activities. We probably would have approved the high school course request, which actually didn't cost as much as the co-curricular request did. But because they were on different paths, it wasn't presented together, which I know is what you were looking for us to do. And so Randy has some ideas about pulling together some of that work and having it feed into a timeline that starts earlier.
Because I think, there's a lot of work that's being done right now. But I think, as you go forward, you're going to be able to kind of look at last year's 3-year plan and add on, right? And I think as a board, then what we can sit down and say, okay, let's move this out a little bit, or let's bring this. We can start identifying the priorities from the board. And it's a visible document that everybody is looking at. And I think if we can, as a board, can sit down and say, okay, this is what we agree to, then as these other things come along, you've got, okay, how does that fit into, the plan that we ultimately agreed to? And the plans can change. The environments can change, but at least you're looking and you're forecasting things out.
All right, thank you, Rebecca. So the next agenda item, you don't have to bring it up yet either, Rebecca, is the budget planning process document. Now, as the committee members, you had an opportunity to see this document earlier. It was a draft, and now you have an opportunity to take a look at the document itself. Members of our administrative team have had a chance to look at it, like the number of sections. There has been some discussion from some of the building principals that they're wanting to take a closer look at some of the sections, especially with some of the possible retirements that we might have But as of right now, no major changes to that planning process document. So I think what I would just do is ask if any committee members have any questions or want Rebecca to pull up a certain page. We can certainly do that and then basically go from there.
Steve, I do have a question. I think I'm on page 5.
Okay.
It's staffing ratios. Didn't understand the line, students with disabilities, 72 staff. And then 4,300 kids. Students with disability ratio is based on total
I
enrollment.
think
So
it's a
that's
page
your
before.
total.
The page before.
I just didn't understand what that data was.
Sure. What that has done is track the total number of FTE, teaching staff, FTE in the special education department compared with the total enrollment of the district. And so right now we're at 72 teaching staff in the special education department. So basically, as an overall ratio to your total student population, that's where the 60.99 comes from. Another way that we could look at that is track that number against the number of students with IEPs. Every year in December, the state does require us to report that data in to the state of Wisconsin. So that's another way that we could look at it, but it's just in general, tracking the teaching staff, this line against the total, the grand total of the enrollment.
And that's what you're doing at each school, just tracking total staff and total students.
Total students, yeah. And the student with disabilities is a district-wide number. The rest of them are building numbers. So it's just a little different look compared to the other lines. And we can certainly present that in a variety of ways. This is just the way that it's been tracked over time.
Yeah, personally, I'm not sure it's a very valuable. I'm not sure what we get out of that ratio. And even when we look at the high school historical ratios, and I know we had this discussion a couple of years ago, and I don't think is there any way to look at the ratio of, what I'd like to know is how big are our classes at the high school? How many classes are at 30? Have we climbed above 30? There's just nothing in here that gives me that information, because you always do total staff, and there's so many staff that don't, they're not in the regular kind of group with regular kids. I don't know if there's any way to look at that. Tim and I talked about it one time. Could we look at just like, those required beginning classes, freshman biology, freshman algebra, freshman geometry, or something to give us a sense of what's happening. I just hear they're getting bigger and bigger, but we never really get any information on class size at the high school or at the middle school.
Yeah, I don't think this page
It
does
doesn't.
justice to the teaching staff.
Right.
In fact, I think it could be misleading to the public. Oh, you only have 14 kids in a classroom.
I know it. I
And,
don't like
at
this
Arboretum, and you only have
information at
13
all.
at Prairie. Why, now, of course, on the next page, you see a different step, but I think this is misleading for the public.
So,
I agree.
so could you put another column in there for teaching staff? And what we could define as teaching staff is that, the teacher plus the para plus, how do you define that? Because, you might, we've got a lot of paras, right? And I don't specifically know how many paras. One-to-one on teachers versus paras. Is it 2 teachers per para.
Maybe we definitely want information in here that is helpful to you. So if this particular look at the data is not helpful, what I can do in a couple of things, I can certainly talk with Tiffany Logan about, from the special ed lens, what would be helpful in a better way of showing this. And then certainly from, the middle school and the high school, I would need to get feedback from Tim, and I see Tim's in the back of the room. I would need to get some feedback from Tim on what would be a way that we could present this information that would be helpful to you so that you can take a look at it. Because this is really high level grand totals divided by
Right, I
Right.
know what it
student
is.
population. And if you're looking for different information, we'd rather get you what would be helpful.
I
And
do
so-
like what you've done with the K-6 ratios. I mean, that tells the story. It tells you, how many sections per grade, the average class size per grade. It gives you good information.
So last year, Joan, you gave us feedback that you liked that, but also for the projected year. So we added that
Yes.
into the process. So we not only have the current year, but we have what that would look like for the following year. Would something similar, I'll just say, I obviously need Tim's help, but something along those lines that we could create for middle school, high school, where you would see at the, call it the core classroom levels or the required courses, something along those
Something
lines?
along that line that would give us a better indicator of class size and how it changes.
If you're gonna have this, I mean, that does present a staffing picture, but it doesn't present the classroom picture. And so if there could be a parentheses underneath this, ratios include paraeducators, I don't know if they include high school counselors or not, but interventionists, whatever you're including in that number, so that the public knows it's not just the individual teacher.
So Tim, I'll connect with you to pick your brain on some ideas, if that's all right. Any other thoughts or feedback on this?
I guess what that's gonna, let's say you go here and you say, instead of staff, it's teachers. So now you brought the class size up from 14.5 into that board policy, right? Then you gotta look at, the rest of the staff, because that's overhead. How do you right size your overhead? With the support staff.
Yeah, we will definitely take a look at this and see what ideas we can come up with to, because like I said, last year you gave us the feedback on the K-6 and projecting it forward, and we added that in. So we want to make sure that this document reflects the information you're looking for. So we will work on it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
If you look at the high school, the thing to your point, you get the freshman class that everything's got big. So those are big. But then you get all these enrichment courses, which are, I'm assuming, are small. So could you break it down into a percentage of, these are required courses, and out of all the classes that we offer, 30% are maxed out, 20% are in a different range.
we do have something that we have to do with open enrollment that I can see what Tim thinks about how we could maybe take that and expand it or. So I definitely will need help from other members of our administrative team, but we will come up with some ideas and bring that back.
Cool.
Thanks.
Otherwise, Rebecca, if you want to jump back. Okay, so the 3-year staffing requests. So a couple points I wanted to make about this. The first one is Ally has organized this in a couple of ways. One is by fiscal year, which we included here. We also have it by building and department. If you would have any interest in seeing it that way as well, we can put that into a future agenda, but we thought that that'd be a lot. So we just organized it by fiscal year from this look. The members of the administrative team had an opportunity to talk about these requests at the last cabinet meeting. We did break up into groups and everyone had a chance to start talking through the process of identifying priorities. We have meetings that we're scheduling to dive deeper into this. So I just wanted to share that we're continuing to review the requests with the members of our team. We're not requesting any action at this time. The next meeting of the budget committee will begin the process of sharing priorities and a plan to include some of these requests in the first draft of the budget. And of course, to seek budget committee members' feedback. We know that given the state budget constraints, we can't simply take all of the requests that we've received and just include them in the budget planning process. So we are going to have to look at a prioritization process. But basically, what you have in front of you is the full list of requests organized by year. We are showing you everything that we did receive. Certainly not expecting any deep dive at this point, other than just begin the dialogue of the data we've been collecting, the process we've been putting in place, the feedback that we're looking to get. And then our intent is at the next budget committee meeting to start providing some prioritization and getting feedback from this committee as we move forward. So I would call this the first step in putting this together. But do you have any initial reaction or any thoughts as far as what might be helpful to this committee between this meeting and the next meeting?
So if you open up the staff planning, the 22-23, the first column that I see is teaching FTE. So you have like 1%,
Make it a larger.
3%. Is that what you're anticipating the cost of that position to go up?
So the members of our administrative team were basically equating a request to an FTE. So as an example, with the library, the first line there, that would have equated, I believe that was like a extended day to their contract.
Oh, like an additional
That equated
day,
to
like-
0.01 and only
Okay.
$650.
Oh, okay,
So
I get it.
the members of the administrative team were attempting to complete this in a consistent way across
Oh,
multiple
So
Yeah.
like 3
buildings and-
days, 2 days.
Right, 3 days, 2 days,
I get it.
etc. So all of the members of the administrative team know what they were doing when they put this in.
Okay.
And so that's why I was stating that a future step for us is to, so as an example, we're gonna meet with Tim to begin the discussion on middle school, high school,
Okay.
prioritization. Our goal will be to bring back those requests that the members of the administrative team are saying are most important for us to consider
Okay,
by the start of the next school year, and then
Alright.
which ones are important for us to consider the following year. We haven't done any of that yet. This
Okay.
was just kind of the
Alright.
raw
I-
data.
Right.
putting it
I
in.
just didn't understand
Sure.
what the FTE and the dollar number.
Yep.
So like a 0.5 might be a 50%
Yep,
position?
yep.
I get it
Yep.
now. Okay.
and so is that, so we have a half-time site that's shared between schools? Is that how that works?
I don't know off the top of my head whether or not that is a
I assume that was
standalone
what that
or
was.
whether it's combined. I don't know if Brian
Right.
knows or not.
It's more than 6, because we also have 4K responsibilities, and so we have 6 sites and approximately 6 buildings and plus 4K responsibilities, and so it would be in addition, so that every building would have essentially its own full-time site.
Okay,
Right. Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
So just help me understand, LMTC, you get 0.01. And that's 1 day.
Yeah.
Basically.
So that would have been the equivalent to 0.01 FTE in extended days. So some members of our teaching staff have additional days in their contract beyond the standard calendar.
Okay.
And that would be each of those, like pathways is additional days, instructional coaches additional days. So whenever you see something that small,
Yeah.
it's related to a request to add some additional days to someone's contract to basically equate to the dollar amount to the column to the right of that. So what you will see at the next meeting is a further refinement, additional meetings with the administrative team, prioritization, and coming back and sharing some more specifics with you about some of those things that we think make sense to line up. And then obviously we have to line up reallocations to go with them. We don't have additional resources being provided. So we have to line up reallocation ideas along with any ideas for moving things forward for next year. And we will be doing that. It doesn't make a lot of sense for us to bring in $400,000 worth of requests and not have ideas
right.
for how to meet those requests. And basically, we need reallocation ideas to go along with ideas for additional expenditures. So this is just to share with you where we are in the process. I think it has gone really well. I mean, the members of our administrative team definitely all spent time taking a look at this. We did talk a lot about this concept of a 3-year plan, getting organized. I would say our administrative team really, dove into this and spent quite a bit of time working on it. We did a cabinet meetings, and we think for a first round of doing this, we certainly did a nice job of capturing a wide variety of requests. Now we need to try to put it into a format that makes sense for us to consider as we move ahead in the short term. If there isn't anything else on that, I'll jump into the next topic. I really labeled this budget planning between school board committees. We talked about this at the last budget committee meeting. I know, Jack, you brought up the topic of committees of the board being coordinated and planning the fiscally related impact items as part of a bigger picture and as part of a plan. And we talked about finding opportunities to do that. At the last HR committee meeting, which was on Monday, January 31st, There were two proposals that impacted the budget planning process, and I'm just going to share them. I think it's important to note that one committee cannot realistically look at every single proposal that every other committee is looking at. But one committee can provide feedback when there's a fiscal implication that affects the overall plan of the district. So I'll give you an example when we talk about the aquatic center. So Brian provided a proposal and information through working with Christine Acker to the HR committee on the aquatic center. During the discussion of that proposal, HR committee members talked about some options for how do we fund an increase in wages in the aquatic center. I mentioned that in Fund 80, which is where the majority of our expenditures for the pool are sitting, especially for lifeguards and positions like this, we have a Fund 80 tax levy. We have user fees, so people pay to use the pool. We have facility use fees when organizations pay to use the pool. And then we also have a fund balance in Fund 80. All of those are viable options for looking at when do you, if the board wants to approve an increase in the aquatic center. The tax levy, as we know, is a part of a board plan to have a consistent tax rate across fiscal years. So it is important for the budget committee to be involved in any discussion that might relate to the property tax levy. So you can see when I put in the notes here, the total cost of the wage increase is approximately $35,000. So Brian figured that out as an estimate. We do have a fee proposal from Christine Acker that would generate about $11,500 in fees. The balance would then have to be associated with either the fund balance in Fund 80, which there is money for that, or an increase in the property tax levy. I did note what the fund balance was, and I did state that that is higher than normal due to decreased community service activities during the last couple of fiscal years. So our Fund 80 is in a very strong financial position. The board could approve the aquatic center proposal without increasing fees and without adding to the tax levy, and just use the funds in the fund balance. Those are funds that have already been collected from the community through the property tax levy the last couple of years. Or there could be a consideration of increased user fees, as Christy has put together a proposal. But in general, this is why this would be a good topic for the budget committee members to look at as far as input on the how, right? The how should we fund something. So I will note that the HR committee is recommending approval of an aquatic center wage increase proposal and ask for this committee to look at the funding. Joan, you sit on both committees. Did you have anything that you wanted to share?
No, you pretty much summed it up. You know, you can look at the pay increases, and we talked about the fact that these mostly high school kids could go to McDonald's and make $15 an hour, and to be a lifeguard, there's substantial training, and we need to be competitive, and we need to keep that pool safe for our swimmers, and it all makes sense. But the how to do it, we did talk about that, but really felt that this committee is really the how to do it. We think it should be done. And we kind of thought it probably fit into a blend of categories, maybe increase the fees a little bit without making them not attainable for all of our community members. We don't want our swim lessons so expensive that, you know, people can't afford them. So, Steve did a nice job summarizing all that. So, I'd be in favor of that blended model of looking at increasing our fees. But, and I looked at Christie's suggestion because we did not have that at the HR committee. I thought that those seemed reasonable. And then to take the rest out of our funding.
Yeah, I thought the increases compared to area facilities was very reasonable. We're still, I think, not the highest.
Right.
And in fact, in some areas by a significant difference. My only concern with raising the 10 visit for on an individual basis is the impact on families that are at a minimum wage type of thing. And do we already do something for them, or because we may be pricing some of them out of this opportunity. If you're paying $30 a month, I think is what it was for 4 kids. Yeah, I know my grandson's mother couldn't afford that because she had 4 kids. And so I'm a little bit concerned about that part of it. Do we have a thing, some kind of structure in place to address that? And I don't know if we do.
Yeah, that's a good question. We did talk about that a little bit at the committee meeting. So for school-based programs, so this would be a school-based program. We do have our policy of waiving fees if a family is willing to share that with us, because their application goes to TAR.
Right.
There's a process where they can complete and check some boxes for sharing that information. One of them is to share it back with the school offices. They don't have to do that. If they do that, then we do know about it and we can waive school-related fees. If they don't, then we wouldn't waive the fees. But if someone did mention, we would refer them back to food service and ask them to fill out the waiver.
But that one applied to like the open swim events where they pay dollars to go in. I think it's.
We have at least intended to waive all school-related fees for families that qualify for free or reduced. So that would be the intent, as long as the information has been shared with us.
But open swim is not a school activity, as I understand it. So.
Well, anything that we charge for in the pool.
It is, okay. So anything would cover that. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
So is this a proposal then to increase these fees? I'm looking at the community ed fee comparison increase.
So what you see in front of you is some information that this committee could choose to bring to the full board as a proposal. As an example, this committee could choose to move the fee increase proposal from Christy Knacker forward, which would generate about $11,500 of the additional wage increase of $35,000. That's an option. Basically, we tried to put the information out there so that you as a committee can make whatever decision you would want to make from a funding perspective. The HR committee is recommending approving the wage increase. The question is, how would the budget committee recommend funding it? And what would the preference be? As Joan did indicate, there was support at the HR committee for the concept of an increase in fees so that the users of the pool would also pay a portion of the increase in the wages, but only a portion of it, which is why we presented the information this way.
So Steve, help me understand, define a non-resident. is that a non-resident of the school district or a non-resident of Waunakee?
It would be a non-resident of the school district.
Okay.
So if someone lived in the Middleton Cross Plains area school district, then they would pay the non-resident fee.
Do we get many non-residents swimming in our pool? Other than maybe it's a friend or?
In general, no, there's not a large demand for that, but in the event that we do, we have a fee schedule for that.
Mhm.
I think it makes sense to take the rental fee increase and divert the rest of the Fund 80. I prefer not to put it on the tax base. And as you pointed out, we have a significant amount of money in there. But basically, it looks like it'd be about 24,000. We still have, close to 460,000 remaining.
And
No, I
I
guess 450,000, excuse me.
and I would suggest, Mark, that it's likely that will actually increase at the end of this fiscal year because it's another year of
Right.
generally reduced
Right.
community service activity. So there would be absolutely no concerns with doing what you just described.
Why are we doing less service? Is it because of the COVID, the buildings are open? We're
Just fewer use, reduced building use went way down. So therefore, things like custodial overtime costs went way down related to building use. The number of programs we offered through our community ed went down. So therefore, the expenditures for the instructors of those programs went down. Just, significant drop in cost really in Fund 80 just has resulted in that higher than typical balance. So Mark, would you want to put a motion to that
Sure,
effect?
I'll put a
out
motion
there
to
for
that out.
consideration?
I would second that motion to increase the fees and cover the rest from funding.
all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed.
The second topic that was reviewed by the HR committee was summer school. So I do believe Sheila's monitoring the Zoom in case we need to reach out to her for any questions. We did talk at the HR committee meeting about the fact that summer school is a very positive program in the Wisconsin school financial system. Ally did include some information in there with basically some screenshots to just highlight where summer school fits into a couple of the main formulas that drive school finance in Wisconsin. But the bottom line is it's just important to note that summer school is a very important program in the Wisconsin school finance system. And our overall budget was impacted a couple of years ago when we weren't able to have our standard, summer school program because of the fact that the student count for summer school is included in both the revenue limit formula and the equalization aid formula. So we're just, in general, trying to make sure we're stating the importance of summer school. With that being said, Sheila and Brian presented information to the HR committee about our place with neighboring districts in wages for summer school, and presented a proposal and information regarding summer school. We do have that proposal in the packet here for your consideration. The HR committee did review the data and supports the increase, but we did want to make sure the budget committee was aware of that increase. And you could see that we have information in here that, the funding of it could range from approving the full increase for the summer of 2022 to phasing it in. I know the concern with phasing it in is that we're already behind some of our neighbors, and Brian referenced during the HR committee, we're not even sure where they're going for this upcoming summer. So a phasing approach, while it is certainly something, this committee, of course, could consider, the concern that Brian would express is that we're behind already, and then that would, continue that. So
So it's
Brian-
already been approved by the HR.
So it has been recommended, we
Might
might,
as well approve it here.
so I would say the point of bringing it here, Jack, is for this committee to have a chance to weigh in on how this fits in, what your thoughts are, funding ideas and concepts behind this, and just making sure we can answer your questions regarding the impact on the school district, school finance system. But in general, the idea was to make sure that this committee had a chance to look at it as well.
And I appreciate that.
Joan, did you have anything to add? Because you were at the meeting as well.
No, it was really, we don't want to bypass budget when it's $100,000, but, Sheila really spoke to the fact that she has a hard time hiring people consistently in those programs, and it is as Stephen said, it does impact our funding positively, so we want to keep that program.
I do know that, like you said, last spring, there was a ton of positions still open in early May, and I was certainly going to have some of those programs offered. Do you have an idea of how much summer school brings in versus the cost?
So the most significant impact of summer school is on the property taxpayer,
Okay,
because summer school impacts the equalization aid in a very significant positive way. Depending on the year, as we've calculated in the past, it's between $800,000 and $1 million in the aid formula, that if we didn't have summer school would be a property tax shift. And so we've always have promoted a very
Right.
strong and robust summer school program, because it is funded, it actually benefits the taxpayers more than our school budget. It does benefit our school budget, but not to the degree it does our
Okay.
taxpayers through the equalization aid formula. And the main reason for that is because the count for summer school is included in the equalization aid formula. So that's why it's always something that we've been, very proud of the fact that we've had a very large program, because of the fact it's one of those few things that you can try to control to influence the equalization aid formula. And it's definitely something we've always done before. So I do know Sheila's on the Zoom if anybody had anything that you wanted her to comment on, or otherwise Brian's here as well, if there's anything you wanted Brian to comment on.
So Steve, how do we, we're running into a tough budget, right? And who knows if there's going to be some marksmanship as far as bringing money for, so forth. So let's say it stays the way it is. How do we? Are we going to have to give up something so that we can pay for this?
Yeah,
Or-
absolutely, Jack. If we approve something like this, it's going to be administrative, or our goal administratively, to find a reallocation that matches this. And we will do that. So everything that we bring forward is really at this point about priorities. And examples that I've given is that we don't need to replace our copy machines this summer, which is $60,000. So our intent is, just like when we looked at the 3-year staffing plan, to bring reallocation concepts forward as well to match this, because we don't have an increase in revenues, like you're pointing out, that we have to bring forward reallocation proposals in the budget planning process as well. The one thing that we do know is that when you look at whether or not we would spend $100,000 on equipment, that we don't necessarily have to buy, or investing in a summer school program which pays back our taxpayers, we would absolutely want to have that opportunity to show you what we believe a number of things that we would do and not do, excuse me, instead of doing this. And so everything we bring forward, we're gonna have to do that.
So I think the other thing that you gotta look at, you just brought up an example that we don't have to replace our copiers this year.
Yep.
So that solves this year's budget. If it's another type budget, you know, you can't continue to give up your copiers. So you gotta find something else,
Right.
you know, so anyways,
I would make a motion to approve the summer school increase.
Second,
all in favor?
I,
All right, so Rebecca, if you want to scroll down. Tiffany Logan is requesting consideration of special education positions at the high school. Her requests are not immediate, so if you had a chance to take a look at them, you will know that what she's trying to do is get out early in the hiring process. And what I've identified in the notes is that special education and English language learner staffing requests can be connected to students who are moving into our district with existing educational plans for those services. Both Tiffany and Chris did an awesome job with that last fall, identifying all of the students that we could connect to changes in staffing. The state does have a program in place that does allow us to request funding when we do have increases in costs in these two particular areas. So this would be different than the previous request. We would not need to bring reallocation ideas forward when we are looking at something regarding special education. We just would need to be able to connect again additional students with IEPs to the additional requests. So Tiffany has been asking to bring these forward to the next board meeting. She will be there next Monday night to explain. I just wanted to make sure that this committee was aware of the fact that she has requested this discussion at next Monday night's board meeting. Again, because she's wanting to try to get out ahead of the hiring process. Because special ed positions are, as you know, competitive, and the earlier you can get out and try to hire people, the better.
Steve, is the special ed number, I thought that's, does that limit us to hiring a more inexperienced teacher, say 0 to 5 years and 0 to 10 years?
So this process, transfer service, actually allows us to put in the actual cost of the person that we hire. And so we're able to go in and actually say that, you know, let's say we did hire someone, salary and benefits were more experienced.
Right.
We actually can put that in
Okay.
for that person. So we are
Right.
not limited to
Okay.
more inexperienced or lower cost positions.
So given that, I motion we accept the proposals.
So before we do that, will we get any state aid out of this then as well? Is that what
Yes.
I'm hearing? So we get state aid plus we get the transfer of service. So these
Yep.
positions aren't necessarily costing us that much.
Right, and the only thing I will note is the state categorical aid, just in general, always comes the year after you spend the funds, but you're right, Jack, you do get both. You get the transfer service, and then you also get the state categorical aid for eligible positions, which is why this program is so powerful, really, is it gives you that ability. And we don't have too many of those opportunities in Wisconsin School of Finance. but it does exist for special ed and English language learner programs.
So we get a
So
motion.
I
on the
would
floor?
second Mark's motion.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Next,
Next topic is, I'm just sharing that as we're continuing to just make sure we're connecting the referendum planning process with all of our other planning, is we are going to be sharing a draft of a community survey with the board at the February meeting. We did talk about the facility related pieces with the committee before this, but there's also an operational referendum question that we have drafted. So we're seeking feedback on that. And this question asks, what type of expenditures would the community support in an operational referendum question? So we're going to ask the members of the committee to take a close look at that question and to give us to share your thoughts on what that looks like. Because as an example, in that question, we asked about the $2.1 million referendum, which was put in place in November of 2020. And we asked the public what their feedback would be on the continuation of the 2.1 million versus letting it expire. Those are the kind of questions that we've at least drafted up initially for feedback from the community. I just wanted to share with you that your feedback would be appreciated. Jack's not going to be at the February board meeting, but Randy and I are going to find a time with Jack when he comes back to get your thoughts on that as well, Jack. And then for Joan and Mark, we'd appreciate any perspective you might have on, certainly from the budget committee lens, of an operational referendum question and what that might look like. Okay.
sounds good. Next,
And then I'm going to just ask Ally to share a little bit about the cyber assessment. Just as a reminder, our auditors included a recommendation that the district look at a cyber assessment. Jack was very helpful in sharing some of his contacts. And Ally has been doing some follow-up work with the contacts that Jack provided and has some information in here. And Ally, would you mind just sharing the work that you've done in this area?
Yep, so initially we met with David Kajman, and he kind of just filled us in on what we should be looking for and kind of how we should approach the situation. His main recommendation was that we talk to Bill Nash, who we did end up talking to shortly after we talked to David, and he works for an organization called CISA. They are part of the Department of Homeland Security, and they provide no-cost services to governmental agencies in the area of cybersecurity. So I talked with Bill for about an hour, and we went through all the services that they offer, and he recommended 2 that we take advantage of. The first one would be their cyber hygiene scanning assessment, where they would go through some higher level things just to kind of see where we're at. And then he recommended that we sign up to do the more in-depth vulnerability assessment, and that would be 2 weeks. They would spend 5 days in person and 5 days outside, doing a little bit more in-depth with our network and some of our staff and stuff like that.
so is this is all through the state, there's,
Through CISA, yep.
so it's a state group, or it's funded by the state.
Yes, you pay for it with your taxes. It's paid
Right.
for, yep,
So, but from our budgeting standpoint, it's free.
correct.
Sounds great.
Okay.
So do you need a motion on that?
So is there, are we proving both, or is there a difference between 1 and 2?
He recommended we do both.
Oh,
One is just a
okay.
little bit higher level, kind of a good place to start,
Yeah.
but they're both no cost to the district.
And then
so-
you'll get feedback from him and it's something
Correct.
that sounds like a great plan to begin with.
So they'll recommend if we have to put hardware, firewalls, things like that in,
Yeah.
and that's where it comes into the budget process. classes.
Yeah.
Correct.
But most of these groups, you know, if you do it in a company, it's like $5,000.
And then
Yeah,
he
so-
said they even have some services afterwards that if they find things they can help with too that are still free of cost, so.
Really good, a good concept. Thank you, thank you.
Well, anything else?
So do you need a motion on this, or you're just gonna do it?
I would say we're looking for a motion for Ally to move forward with the
Sure,
information.
I would
she's
make a
presented.
motion for Ally to continue this process and move forward with these two assessments.
Second.
All in favor? Those
Oh my
opposed?
gosh, that was a strange meeting.
7 o'clock on the dot, Jack.
Wow, Chris, I
All
did-
right.
I had to get you guys moving on this last.
I
conference.
did.
Did you need to set up a meeting before we adjourn?
So I would like to have this committee meet again, similar time frame before the March board meeting. So Jack, what would work for you?
I'll be back in the country on the 18th. So anything after the 18th.
I am going to be out of town the week before, so from the 7th, that week I'm out of town, so if we could go the week before in March. Like starting on the 28th of February, that week would be good for me.
We just stacked 3 meetings on the 28th, right?
Yeah, we don't,
No,
We're
it's a
already-
weekend, weekend.
we're already
Um,
back.
So what other days that week works?
It's the 28th, is that a Monday?
So the 28th is the day that's full.
Tuesday, the 1st.
5:30?
5:30 is good
For
with
what day?
me. Tuesday, March 1st,
Sure.
5:30.
Steve, do you want this meeting after the HR committee meeting? What is that? The HR committee meeting is on the 2nd.
I could go Wednesday night too.
Sure.
Can you do
That works,
Wednesday
yeah.
night instead of Tuesday night?
For me, for bringing it up.
Okay. Wednesday night. Ash Wednesday.
what
Will you
time?
have ashes in
Oh.
it?
That's Ash Wednesday.
Yeah, I didn't know if that was important.
Is that important? I mean, do you not
It's
want to do it?
Maybe Thursday, just because I'm still leaving that.
What are we talking?
Can we-
I can't
can we
hear
do
you.
it?
I haven't heard you call me.
We can do it in the
Mark,
morning.
how early can you make a meeting in the morning?
I can do it as early as you need to.
Like if we did it at 7:30 to 8:30, would that work?
7:30 to
7:30
8:30?
to 8:30? Does that work for you, John?
I can do it.
On the 2nd,
On the second?
No,
No.
because on the 2nd we have HR at 8
at 8:15.
Let's do Thursday.
Thursday morning.
Works for me.
Okay, Thursday morning, 7:30.
Good. You'll send those meetings out diligently.
March 4th, 3rd.
Third.
Need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Mark,
Mark,
say
Second,
second.
I'm sorry, we need a
All
second.
in favor?
Aye.
Aye.